policy, utility regulation, community outreach. So we do a lot of things, and we've got a lot of an amazing team. Among them is our founder and CEO, Sarah Wright, who I'm going to hand things over to get us started.
Hello, thanks, Brandy, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. And for those of you who don't know me, I can't see everyone. I'm the founder and CEO of Utah Clean Energy. And this year we launched the virtual Brown Bag series because we wanted to connect more often with you, our amazing supporters, partners, and collaborators, and to keep you in the loop on some of the exciting things that we have underway and around climate issues in general. So there's so much happening right now that we could actually do a brown bag every week, but we landed on quarterly. And it's fitting that our final brown bag of the year is a reflection of some of the top wins from the past year. And I hope that you are excited about the progress that we are. And before we dive into that, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the bigger picture of this work. And today's stories are a snapshot of what we need to do in order to turn the tide on climate. And so at Utah Clean Energy, we're obviously focused on the energy sector, and we have our sights set on a zero carbon emissions future. And what that means is zero emission homes and buildings, zero emission cars and trucks, a zero emission electricity system, and last but not least, all of these ambitious goals are made possible when we empower bold climate leadership on the local, state, regional, and federal level. So this is the work of Utah Clean Energy, and it's only made possible by the support and partnership of you, this community. So from all of us at Utah Clean Energy, thank you for joining us on our journey to zero emissions. We have come a long way, and we still have much further to go, but I'm grateful to be on the journey with you. And really with that, I want to turn things back over to Brandy, and she'll kick things off.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. A little bit of housekeeping. So we're really excited to introduce you to several of our experts that lead different programs here at Utah Clean Energy. But to get through all of the content, we're going to hold questions till the end. But as we're talking about these things, please feel free to pose those questions in the chat, and I will get to them at the end. And if we don't have time to get through all the questions, our experts will be typing away and answering your questions as we go. So in that chat box, please feel free to pose those questions, and we'll get rock and rolling. I'll say that it was hard to narrow down and pick just 5 wins from the past year. As Sarah mentioned, this is an extraordinary time to be working on climate change, but we love a challenge. So we weave through a bunch of stuff from the past year, from our work with the Conservative Climate Caucus to, Utah's largest builder committing to upgraded energy standards. We hired Max Becker, who I believe is here today, who's leading our efforts to unpack the billions of dollars of federal funding towards climate action. But ultimately, we landed on 5 wins that we think really paint the picture of not just our work, but lay the foundation towards a zero energy future. So I'm going to kick things off with our first top win, which is renewable energy in Utah skyrockets. If we're going to end our dependence on polluting energy, we need to accelerate the transition to clean, renewable energy, clean, renewable powered electricity grid. And in 2023, our many years of work on this finally paid off with the commitment by PacifiCorp for their planned addition of solar, wind, and battery storage. It's the largest planned addition in the company's history. So to tell you a little more about this win is our climate scientist and energy analyst, Logan Mitchell. Logan.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, there's, as you've said, as you've noted, there's been substantial progress this year. Our electricity providers, their goal is to provide the least cost, least risk energy system for electricity that powers our lives and all of the things that we do. And the big transition that we've had is understanding that we need a reliable electricity sector. And in the past, there's been concerns about that, but we've made substantial progress. And the latest 20-year integrated resource plan that PacifiCorp announced this year has a dramatic escalation of clean energy that they're planning to build out over the next 20 years. What you can see in this chart here is the planned addition over the next decade, where renewable energy is skyrocketing, and at the same time as we're building out that clean energy resources, the fossil fuel energy that we need is declining. And so we can see that we're on this really good trajectory now, and there's still a lot of work to do, but we're on a really good trajectory, and it's really being enabled by all of this battery storage that they're planning to build out. This addition it's nearly a quadrupling of our wind and solar, and gigawatts of new battery storage, and this means that all of this clean energy that we're building means that we can start to phase out our fossil fuel resources. This is super exciting news for our climate, and I guess one last thing I'll say that's on this slide is that in the next decade, we're going to see a 90% reduction of CO2 emissions from our electricity sector compared to 2005. So to understand the transformative impact of all of this new clean energy, I'd like to just talk to you briefly about how this clean energy will affect our homes and buildings. So this is the CO2 emissions from, on the left is a typical home in Utah, from the different parts of our home. So on the top in the yellow is emissions from the electricity sector, and on this left chart has a typical Utah home. The red is the emissions from natural gas usage in the home, and then almost doubling the total emissions from that home is actually upstream leakage of methane from the oil and gas extraction sector. So it's actually a really important component of our overall emissions here in Utah. So the Uinta Basin has a lot of leakage in it. And so you can see that in a typical Utah home, as we're reducing our emissions from the electricity sector over the next decade, you're getting like a 22% reduction in overall emissions. But if you compare that to an all-electric home on the right, you can see that as we electrify our clean energy system, if all of the emissions are coming from the electricity sector, and as we clean up that electricity sector, you're getting to near zero emissions from any all-electric building. So that's really illustrates why it's so important to electrify our homes. And it's going to be the same sort of a story for electric vehicles. So.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So on that note, Logan, let's switch gears really quickly to the coming year. Can you touch on kind of what's on deck in 2024 for renewable energy?
Yeah, sure. So in the coming year, as we've seen this new plan get rolled out, and there's a lot of conversations with stakeholders, there's actually some folks that are trying to push back on this new ambitious plan that we're seeing. So we've got our work cut out for us to ensure that this plan actually comes to fruition. There's a lot of things to build and a lot of technical details to figure out. This is really the deployment decade, and there's a lot of work to do to ensure that it happens on time and on budget, and is technically feasible. There's also some really exciting opportunities for example, the Solar for All grant that's going to bring clean energy resources to 20,000 homes. This is going to be really transformative to a lot of Utah families, especially folks in low income and disadvantaged communities in Utah. It's a really exciting opportunity. And we're also going to be working on legislation to improve the export credit rates for rooftop solar. This is the amount of money that you get paid for producing energy and giving onto the grid so that you can help your community with reliable and clean energy. So that's just a few of the things that we're looking at in the year ahead. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brandy. Some really exciting stuff. So on to
Awesome.
you.
Thank you, Logan. And thank you for all of your amazing work before the Utah Public Service Commission and the utility arena. It's a major lift. But I am going to take us now to our second win of the year. And again, put those questions in chat. Logan is going to stick around and he'll be here to answer any questions you have on Utah's renewable energy growth. But in the meantime, our second win of the year, I'm going to just go to what is a shameless plug, admittedly, to mention Utah Clean Energy's Climate Innovation Center, currently under construction. What this building represents are all the different elements that embody zero emission homes and buildings. And as Logan said, our built environment plays a major role in a healthy climate, and emissions from our homes and buildings are a large contributor to that. But there is a better way. And in 2023, Utah Clean Energy worked with the Utah Housing Corporation to give affordable housing and energy efficiency and EV boost. So I'm going to turn things over to our building and decarbonization manager, Kevin Emerson, to tell you all about it. Kevin.
Brandy. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. So as Brandy mentioned, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware, homes and buildings have a really important role to play in a decarbonized future. And this particular win is a really exciting development from earlier this year that we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. So the Utah Housing Corporation, for those of you who may not know, is an independent agency that it administers the federal low-income housing tax credits for Utah, otherwise known as LIHTC. So earlier this year, we worked with this agency and a handful of interested and supportive developers to submit comments and recommendations to the Utah Housing Corporation. And the goal was to expand the incentive packages in the LIHTC Qualified Allocation Plan. That's basically the plan that the state uses to determine how it's going to provide these tax credits for affordable housing in the state. And the goal was to encourage, to make some changes to the plan to encourage developers to build affordable housing that is more efficient and that's poised for zero emissions. And in addition, we wanted to expand access to EV charging in affordable housing as well. And the good news is we were successful in our efforts. Affordable housing projects that now meet one of a number of energy efficient or green building standards, which are pictured here, qualify for expanded financial incentives. And these incentives are actually very competitive. So it really has an impact in how affordable housing in Utah is designed and constructed, and obviously how it operates as well. So we're especially excited that two priority standards that are kind of top line for us, the Energy Star Next Gen standard and U.S. Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home standard, were included in this change. And that's because these standards are not only highly efficient, but they also promote electric readiness and all electric construction. And as we already talked about, these are really important elements of building decarbonization as our grid gets cleaner. So in addition to that, now for affordable housing projects in Utah to be the most competitive for these tax credits, they will also include EV charging infrastructure in the projects. And we think it's essential for all community members, including those living in affordable housing, to have access to EV charging. So in a nutshell, this policy brings the benefits of energy efficiency and electrification to low-income families in our community. And Utah's low-income families will, because of this, will get to enjoy the benefits of more comfortable home, more healthy housing, reduce energy burdens, and also removing the obstacle that prevents folks from accessing electric vehicles to the scale that we really need.
Excellent work, Kevin. Thank you. That is a huge win for 2023. So we've already accomplished big things. Tell us what's on deck for 2024.
Thanks, Brandy. Again, our building team is really excited about a new project that we've been working on for a number of months, and we just got a green light recently. This is a project that is supported through a grant from the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. This project, which is one of many for 2024 that we have going on, it's going to allow us to bring resources that will support technical assistance to help our residential construction industry leapfrog ahead and go beyond standard practice to zero emission constructions. So we'll be working with this technical assistance provider to provide technical assistance to probably at this point around 8 builders or developers, with the goal of helping them revise and update their construction plans and also their construction specifications to meet super efficient standards that are also all electric or possibly electric ready. And they're pictured here again, the Energy Star Next Gen standard and the Zero Energy Ready standard. And so the goal is to really just help make energy efficient and all electric construction a standard practice, and removing a barrier that that's preventing that from becoming standard practice today. We'll also support the construction of one of these homes as a feature kind of showcase home in an upcoming Parade of Homes event next year. So those are exciting projects that we're working on, again, of many that relate to the new construction space, but also existing homes and existing homes for our low and moderate income households continues to be a priority for us. So in 2024, we also will be working hard to provide support and really push hard to help the State Office of Energy Development develop and then submit a plan to the U.S. Department of Energy at the earliest possible opportunity that will unlock over $100 million in rebates that will support home energy upgrades, which include efficiency and electrification, with a focus on low and moderate income Utahns. This is a really unprecedented opportunity to take advantage of these federal rebate dollars, and that's a priority for us to help bring those resources to the state of Utah as quick as possible.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And just so I heard it right, you said we're partnering with hopefully eight different builders to help them upgrade their, that's incredible, building efficiency standards. We often say that energy efficiency and high performance building is the unsung hero of a healthy climate. And Kevin Emerson has led this work for 20 years, basically. You've been here and working specifically on this. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be working on energy efficiency, most definitely. So in addition, though, and you also touched on electrifying our homes, but that's not the only thing we're electrifying. That brings me to our next win, is zero emission transportation. The transportation sector is one of the largest sources of CO2 emissions in the country, to say nothing of its contributions to our bad local air quality. But electric vehicles require no gasoline and they emit no pollution from tailpipes. So that makes them a vital clean air and climate solution, which is why Utah Clean Energy has been focusing on electrifying our transportation. And when we talk about electric vehicles, it's so much more than passenger vehicles. The electric and medium and heavy duty vehicle sector is especially important here in Utah, where these vehicles have an outsized impact on our air quality. So to start addressing this issue, we developed the Fleet Electrification Toolkit, launched in 2023, and Kelby Gopal is going to give you all the details of this new resource. Kelby.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandy. So if you want to go to the next slide, thanks. So yes, let's talk transportation. There is a lot happening in the electric vehicle space. We've seen a lot of great progress in recent years, and there's still a lot of really important work to be done. And one of the areas that Utah Clean Energy is focusing our efforts on is in the medium and heavy duty vehicle sector. And this was a really intentional decision for us to focus here. According to the Utah Division of Air Quality, Brandy mentioned this, although heavy-duty diesel vehicles account for only 7.5% of the vehicle miles traveled, they produce over 30% of the pollution in Utah. So this presents us with an opportunity that we really can't ignore to have a significant impact on our air quality if we work to transition these fossil fuel-powered vehicles to zero emission. And it's also really important to consider who's most impacted by all of this. In this case, those who live near interstates, who live near ports, freight centers, and warehouse districts are really hit the hardest in this case. And what this means for us here, especially along the Wasatch Front, is that communities, particularly on the west side of Salt Lake Valley, really bear the brunt of this poor air quality and have higher health risks as a result, which really underscores the importance of cleaning up specifically this segment of our transportation sector, which is why we've made electrifying these vehicles a major one of our priorities. So as we focus our efforts on the medium and heavy duty space, one thing that we have accomplished this year is the development of a fleet electrification toolkit. This is found on the UCE's Energy Hub website, and we can drop a link to this in the chat. As you may know, the electrification of medium and heavy duty vehicles has not been happening quite as fast as passenger vehicles. And there are a lot of reasons for this. We don't have time to get into all of that today. But these vehicles are operated differently for different purposes, and they come with some unique challenges when they electrify. The good news here is that technology is advancing really rapidly to address a lot of these challenges, and the market is ramping up. And this is really an area of the transition to a zero emission transportation system that we stand to benefit a lot from in terms of air quality and climate. So the Fleet Electrification Toolkit is a compilation of resources for fleet managers and owners to refer to as they electrify vehicles. There are a ton of available resources out there, and it can get kind of overwhelming to figure out where to go to find the right information. So we've compiled what we think are some of the most helpful resources to help folks get started. And I just want to highlight sort of how the toolkit is organized really quickly. We organized it into categories based on some of the most common questions or challenges around electrification of medium and heavy duty vehicles. So we have some Fleet Electrification 101 information, which has great resources for both public and private fleets. We have sections on incentives for both vehicles and charging infrastructure, analysis tools to help plan a successful electrification project, and charging infrastructure best practices as well, which is one of the biggest challenges to electrification. So these resources are here for anyone who needs them, and we will continue to refine and update what's on the toolkit as things develop. But if you or anyone you know works with fleets, we want you to be aware of this resource as a starting point. And this market, like I said, is really a growing and evolving space. And with support from folks in the industry, decision makers, advocates, and supporters like you all, we can help this segment of our transportation sector reduce emissions, and we'll reap the public health and the economic benefits of electrifying.
Kelby, the toolkit really is so thorough, and it's an amazing resource. Good work. But now that the toolkit is up and running, talk to us a little bit about what you have your sights set on for 2024.
Yeah, thanks, Brandy. I am really, really excited about what we have going on looking into 2024. The first thing I wanted to highlight is a fleet analysis project. And we have funding from the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity that will allow us to help some fleets take steps towards electrification by providing fleet analysis services to a limited number of businesses. So we will contract with a firm that will work with around 5 fleets to use operational data from the fleets to provide some really vehicle-specific insights into things like potential greenhouse gas emissions, criteria emissions reductions, total cost of ownership and savings, the operational feasibility of which vehicles to electrify when and how, and charging needs, which is crucial for a project to be successful. So we're really excited about the real tangible impact that this will have in helping some fleets here locally electrify.
Love it.
And then, yeah, moving to number 2, the thing we're excited about here is an incentive program. So we are working with partners on a bill that would establish the Utah Clean Truck Incentive Program. And this would use federal funding to provide incentives for fleet owners to purchase zero-emission, medium and heavy-duty vehicles with a boost for certain types of applicants, such as businesses that are minority or veteran-owned. So one of the biggest barriers that we know of right now is that even though there are often lifetime savings associated with these vehicles, there's an upfront cost barrier. So this incentive program would help make it possible for certain fleets who want to reduce emissions and save on fuel and maintenance to be able to do so. The bill would also direct the Department of Air Quality to consider the Advanced Clean Trucks rule here in Utah. And this would help to bring more electric models of these vehicles to be available for purchase here in the state. So keep an eye out for this bill going into the 2024 session. We will be sure to help everyone follow along and support this really important policy. And then thirdly, this is just shifting gears really quickly for a moment from medium and heavy duty vehicles Another important aspect of our work is expanding access to EV charging in multifamily housing. And this addresses an existing equity issue in EV adoption. So we're working with local governments to support the adoption of EV readiness ordinances throughout the state. And this is really important, as Kevin mentioned briefly earlier, because those living in multifamily housing typically don't have access to charge at home, which is a big part of making it possible for folks to own an EV. So really with any major shift in technology, such as the one to electrify transportation, that comes with growing pains. And we want to do whatever we can to make sure we don't leave anyone behind. And that includes renters and those living in multifamily housing.
Love it. Thank you, Kelby. I'll just say I drive an electric vehicle and I charge at home. My charger went out recently and I got a taste of what it was to have to only charge out. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of public charging available right now, but it just got me thinking if I lived in an apartment or a condo without my own dedicated charging, it would be a major barrier. So thank you for your work on all of that. And I look forward to more in 2024. As a reminder, I just checked the chat a little bit. Keep those questions coming. We will definitely leave time at the end to get to several of those questions. And I think some of our experts are also answering some as they can. But for now, I'm going to dive right into win number 4. Sarah mentioned earlier, all of our ambitious goals around clean energy, electric vehicles, homes, they are only made possible if we have strong climate leadership from Utah's policymakers, decision makers, and businesses. So our number 4 win of the year highlights just one of the many outcomes in our work to make Utah a national climate leader. And to tell you a little bit more about that is Josh Kraft, our Government and Corporate Relations Manager. Josh, take it away.
Thanks, Brandy. And it's so great to see so many of you who we have the pleasure of working with throughout the year. We have the ambitious goal of making Utah a national leader on climate solutions. And part of that is creating transformative partnerships that will undergird that and facilitate the kind of action that we need to get to zero emissions and facilitate all the wins across the board. One important partnership that we've helped to facilitate this year and we're really excited about is with the leadership of the Salt Lake City, Utah Committee for the Olympic Games, which is spearheading the now very, very likely 2034 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games in Salt Lake City. There's obviously been a lot of excitement given the announcement last week. Sarah and I were both at the lighting of the torch at the Rice Eccles Stadium on Friday evening. But we've been fortunate that Kat Rainey Norman, who is a former Olympic speed skater and the chair of the bid committee, and Fraser Bullock, who's the president and CEO of the bid committee, have been signatories to the Climate and Clean Air Compact. That is a leadership initiative that we helped form in 2020 to help depolarize and bring together leaders around climate conversations. And so it was awesome to have them join at that stage. But a number of our climate leaders through the compact saw an opportunity to partner on the Games bid, and particularly because the International Olympic Committee is requiring that climate solutions to reduce emissions be a critical part of any future Winter Olympic Games. It's obviously necessary for the sport, and it's also because athletes and the public are rightly calling for it. So some of these informal conversations that we had, and Brandy, that last slide, if you go back to that for just a second, shows one of those events that happened throughout this year. Sarah was able to participate in a forum at the Gardner Policy Institute with both Kat and Fraser about the Games opportunity and to talk through it, including that climate piece. That eventually in next month led to a partnership announcement with Utah Clean Energy about supporting a climate positive Games. And I just want to quote that Mark Miller, who many of you may know, former head of Mark Miller Toyota and trustee from the Mark and Kathy Miller Foundation, said that as a signatory to the Climate and Clean Air Compact and volunteer venue chair for the 2002 Winter Games, I see this as an opportunity to demonstrate Utah's leadership on smart and innovative solutions to our energy and climate challenges. You go to the next slide. So this is obviously the beginning of an important partnership that throughout this critical decade to do some really awesome things. And we're looking to the 2002 games and how it helped accelerate tracks as one element to reduce emissions, improve livability and public transportation. There's a way in which this games can be an important catalyst towards low and zero emissions technology, both electricity and transportation infrastructure in our communities, and to highlight the best of what Utah has to offer. One important change in these since 2002, even though the realities of climate are becoming ever so much more present, is that the technology around clean energy and transportation is so much more readily available, and the funding, particularly federal funding, is much greater. And we're seeing such great leadership from our host communities, Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, Park City, Summit County, and others, that we feel like we can make a really big difference. So we're looking at ways in which we can help realize zero emissions infrastructure in our buildings, transportation, and our electricity sector as part of the games, coming up with a real plan to do that over the next few years as they finalize that bid. I want to end here by saying we know the bar is high. Climate is, the realities of climate are getting ever so much more present. But we're really excited because this is an opportunity to make this games climate positive. It isn't just about the competition days that are coming, but it's about our legacy as environmental stewards and about us making this games one that's transformative to reduce emissions. And again, because it's a requirement of the International Olympic Committee, and we're so excited to be here helping out with that.
Awesome update, Josh. Thank you so much for your amazing work on climate leadership. I know we've got legislative session coming up, which you head up for us. Tell us what's on deck for 2024.
Yeah, so obviously we're just a little over a month away from the 2024 legislative session. My colleagues have noted that there's some important opportunities to modernize our residential rooftop solar market, to get some incentives to jumpstart the market for zero emissions medium and heavy duty vehicles. We're going to be working on some energy efficiency appropriations for some energy efficiency legislation. And we're still getting a handle on this, but there's definitely, as Logan noted, going to be some pushback on the clean energy transition, which we want to guard against. We want to let the market and the demands of customers move forward, particularly in the electricity sector, where clean energy is our cheapest and best resource. I'll note that as part of our leadership work, we're going to continue to engage with Utah's congressional delegation. Our partnership with Congressman John Curtis from the 3rd District has been really awesome and essential to taking advantage of Utah's role nationally in shaping climate solutions in the Congress, and to accelerate those. It happens to be Senator Mitt Romney's last year in the Congress, and there is some new member, Congresswoman Celeste Malloy, who's coming in, that we hope to start to develop a partnership with her as well. And I will. The last item is actually our next win. I get 2 wins, Brandy, which is really great. Which is the work on the Beehive emissions reduction plan. While this isn't yet everyday news, it's everyday. People aren't aware that Utah Clean Energy has had a goal for Utah to have a real statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan. That's important for us to be able to identify ways, Utah-based ways, to achieve a low and zero emissions economy across the board. So we can go to the next slide. What's happened here is that as a result of new federal funds available through the Environmental Protection Agency, there's a pot of money, a $5 billion pot of money called the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which is facilitating, enabling states and cities to access funds to undertake emissions reduction planning, and to also do undertaking outreach to disadvantaged communities to help identify those strategies. And so we're really pleased that both the state of Utah, under the Division of Air Quality, and I think some folks are actually here, have agreed to create a planning process called the Beehive Emissions Reduction Plan to create strategies under this banner to start a greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan. And the first phase of this is really fast. It's being conducted between now and March 1st, when the state and also Salt Lake City, as part of a planning process for our metro area here, will be submitting their ideas for a priority climate action plan. So that's the first round of this. But the carrot and the exciting piece is that they can also then apply for about $4.5 billion in competitive funds to implement those strategies. So incentives to support near-term actions that will reduce emissions in our community that can be implemented relatively quickly, to be followed up later by a more comprehensive emissions reduction strategy that we do in a few years. I'll end by saying that we have submitted some ideas to help that are in line with what you've heard today, related to energy efficiency and electrification in our buildings, reducing emissions in our transportation sector, and accelerating some emissions reductions in electricity and also methane reduction. So we're excited to vet those with the state, but and do so between now and April 1st when some of those strategies are due. But we're super excited because this is the first state emissions reduction planning process we've had in 16 years. So a really long time and a critical time for us to, and it really could be transformative to meet our goal of a zero emissions economy. And so we're excited. Thank you. Thanks, Brent.
Excellent job, Josh. Thank you for that. And it really is an exciting opportunity for Utah. I'm just going to put in another shameless plug that I believe the last climate planning process 16 years ago also included Utah Clean Energy, and Sarah Wright was working with, was it then Governor Huntsman on that? So it's kind of fun to have been around this long. All right. Logan, Kevin, Kelby, Josh, thank you all. That was great. Thank you for the rundown. Now we wanted to make sure we left time for some questions and answers with our team. So I am going to stop my share and just go to the group, and bear with me. I'm going to pull up a couple of the questions, and again, we're going to really try to get to everything. And if we don't, we will be answering within the chat. Oh, wow. Awesome. We just got a bunch of new questions. So we'll dive right in. So the first question I wanted to pose dealt with buildings. So I'm going to ask Kevin Emerson to answer. You mentioned there were some incentives coming on deck in 2024 for homes. Are there any incentives that we should be on the lookout for commercial buildings for energy efficiency and electrification?
I am muted. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I put a link in the chat to that question. It's a great question because obviously commercial buildings are critical and existing commercial buildings are very critical. And there are a couple of really important, two that come to mind initially. Tax financial incentives. One is a greatly expanded version of the 179D energy efficient commercial building tax deduction, which is expanded through the Inflation Reduction Act, that expands the tax deduction available to buildings that meet certain levels of energy performance, either new construction or major retrofits. I think the starting, I don't have the number memorized, but it greatly expands. This tax deduction has been around for a while, but it expands the value of the tax deduction for buildings that reduce their energy consumption compared to the standard, one of the ASHRAE standards. And the other one, which doesn't apply if a building is not a Rocky Mountain Power in the Rocky Mountain Power Service area, but any commercial buildings in the Rocky Mountain Power Service area are also eligible for a program that we had a hand in helping to shape and expand called the Whole Building New Construction and Major Retrofit Program. And there's a link there to both of those opportunities.
So Kevin, I know you touched on this already in the chat, but I just want to, in addition to that, do you have a sense of timeline for when some of the IRA funding for homes and buildings will be coming through next year? Is there any sense of that time frame? Thank you,
Yeah,
Nick.
so all the
for
the new expanded tax credits and tax deductions are live and available today. And thanks, David, for that detail. It is up to $5 per square foot for buildings that achieve the highest level of energy savings through the federal tax deduction. And as far as there are also tax credits for existing homes and new homes that are available today, the federal tax credits. As far as the rebate programs, we don't have the timeline yet. We are actively working with the state staff at the state, the Office of Energy Development, to provide support and encourage and respectful and friendly pushing to really go big and go and get an application put together as soon as possible. We hope to see a program launch before the end of 2024. I think that's ambitious. The state there's a number of related federal funding opportunities that have to do with the existing home efficiency and home electrification upgrade space that they're currently working on, and we're tracking and providing some support on that. So that's as much as we know right now.
Fantastic, thank you.
Mhm.
Glenn had a question about the legislature or the 2024 legislative session. Josh, you touched on some of the bills that we'll be looking at. Glenn was asking, and I might need a clarifier if this is referring to any asks regarding the Olympic bid, but any specific asks we're going to be making of the Utah legislature in the coming year.
Yes.
Was the Olympic? Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. So Josh, is there any tie-in with any specific asks for the Utah legislature as it relates to the Olympic bid?
Glenn, it's a good question. We aren't asking directly for, action by the legislature. We're at this point for this session. I think that may come out, and it's a really thing for us to work with the leadership there on about some ways in which we can highlight the opportunity and the benefits from making climate action and clean energy a central point of the bid. So we'll follow it closely. I think that those we'll probably see a little bit more now that the bid is nearly finalized.
Thank you, Josh.
Brandy,
Let's
can I
stay on
chime in just a second? And I think that to Josh's point, we won't have any proactive bills relating to the Olympics. But that said, just the fact that we are now basically in the running, or we will have a 2034 Olympics that calls for climate positive Olympics. There's a lot of really bad bills that are trying to push back that Logan mentioned, and we'll be able to use the 2034 Olympics and the commitments to that as part of our part of the work to fight back on some bad bills and hopefully push some of the good things we're working on.
And we will have our legislative tracker on our website during the session, so you can follow along throughout the whole roller coaster ride. Let's stay on the legislature for just another second. Again, I think some of this was addressed in chat, but Nick asked, solar export credit rates have gone down each year. Do you have any reason to expect that they might go up? And I know that we do have a bill that's going to be exploring export rates. Josh or Sarah, any thoughts there?
I'll speak to that, given that I have battle scores from working on net metering since 2002 and solar export credits. We have a really good sponsor this year, and people like solar and rooftop solar. I think it's our best shot ever. It's never a guarantee. We'll be wanting input and engagement from all of you, but the legislation is structured to improve the payback that you get for the electricity that you send to the grid from rooftop solar. So we'll keep you all posted. We have other partners. O2 is working on it. So it's going to be an all hands on deck, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Take your vitamins now, Sarah and Josh. I have a question for Kelby. Kelby, CJ asks, how has Utah Clean Energy reached out to fleet operators with our new toolkit? Have we been in contact with the fleet operators and managers, and how's that going?
Yeah, really great question. So we have been doing outreach through a number of different avenues. One is just one-on-one outreach with businesses who own fleets, contacting them to have conversations about electrification and what this might mean, and of course share our toolkit and any resources. We're also building relationships with folks in the fleet space who are leading out, like the Utah Trucking Association, as well as others who have contacts with or work with businesses who might own and operate fleets, such as Salt Lake City's Economic Development Department. So we're always looking for new ways to connect with fleets. So I know we connected a little bit in the chat, but we should definitely talk more and see how we can collaborate.
And this is another question. I just want to pose it to the whole group because I know there's been a little back and forth on chat with regards to not just with regards to our fleet work, also our buildings work, and even the renewable energy side. Do we want to talk about any tie-ins, or there was a question about tie-ins with the inland port? That's posed to Kevin, Sarah, or Logan. Any impacts or tie-in, or Kelby?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I saw that question in the chat and was just starting to type out a reply, but happy to just answer it here. So yes, there will be, warehouses and other development happening as the port builds out. We're not aware of any requirements for these warehouses or other developments to be net zero. But if you're interested, the port has outlined their sort of sustainability ideas and plans in an action study on their website. I'm happy to drop that link into the chat if folks want to review that and get a little bit of a better sense of all the different areas that they're thinking about sustainability, including wanting to prioritize zero emission with the fleets and trucks and transportation happening in that space. I don't know if other UC folks have additional thoughts to add.
Good there. Okay.
I'll just say that Kelby is in touch with the folks in the sustainability with the port, and so we are talking to them, and we do have a direct line of communication. So it's more than just a passive, like we're watching what's going on, but we're actually in conversation with them and helping to try to move the needle.
Thank you, guys. This is a little outside of our wheelhouse, but I love the question. I'd love to pose it not just to the Utah Clean Energy staff, but also to the group, because we are part of a larger community that's working on a lot of different climate and clean energy issues. Cynthia asked if there's any consideration for landscaping impacts, mentioning that 65% of annual water use is for outdoor landscaping, efficient landscapes that contain plants or improve efficiency. Sarah, I don't know if you want to mention the Climate Innovation Center, or I would just, if there's anyone in the group that has recommendations for water-wise landscaping, let's put it in there.
I mean, the only thing I can mention with the Climate Innovation Center is that we're trying to capture some of the water to use on our landscape, and the landscape is designed to be drought tolerant and pollinator friendly. But it's right. We do need to have really that's not exactly the scope of Utah Clean Energy's work, but it's very critical. Anywhere that you save water is valuable, not just from a water space, but also from an energy space, because you have to treat all the water that we use. So it has double benefits. But I'd love to hear others' thoughts.
Okay. And we can also put some resources in the chat as well, that I know that there's some really cool local incentives for home and business landscaping that I took the class over the summer to get a good incentive, and it was definitely worthwhile. Okay. Here's one more question for Kevin, and then I think we'll get close to wrapping up. Kevin, the question is, the IRA has some great incentives for home builders. I know we've touched on that already. What's the appetite for home builders? Do you feel like they're keen to take advantage of a lot of these new incentives for efficiency and high performance building? Or is that in your wheelhouse to convince them?
So as probably
Okay.
many of you know, we have a long history of working on state level policy to support energy efficient construction in both commercial and residential buildings. And if you have tracked that work, you know that we haven't been able to make as much progress through a statewide energy code as we would like. But knowing the folks I know in the home building industry and a number of the builders, there is a lot of appetite to take full advantage of existing and expanded and even new incentives. And so, you know, that's part of the kind of the framework of and kind of the thought process of why we're working to provide technical assistance to this group of builders through this project that I mentioned. Is we want to reduce barriers so that the builders are poised to adopt super efficient all electric construction as a standard practice, and there's a lot of builders who are ready to do that. So I'm confident that these new federal tax credits and state incentives and utility incentives that we will continue to help shape will be utilized.
Awesome. I want to just highlight two things that were put in the chat. Cynthia reminded us that it's the Utah Water Savers has a great program for landscaping, and Kelby also just shared some really fun news about that Moab passed an ordinance setting water efficient landscaping standards. So that's awesome. I think we were able to get through all of your great questions. Thank you everybody who posted. We have about 1 minute left if there was any other last minute questions that we didn't get to. But other than that, I'll say I want to thank everybody again for joining us today, for your support of Utah Clean Energy, for your interest in these issues. I know we've thrown a ton of information at you today, as we always do, and we are a technical kind of group. But the fact that you're willing to show up on a Tuesday on your lunch break to learn about these things says a lot about the incredible community that we have of climate advocates, and that we can really make a lot of progress with a community like this. To my team, any other last notes? Any other suggestions for our audience today? Awesome. All right, with that, I'm going to close out the virtual brown bag of 2023. Thank you again, and we'll see you in 2024. Thanks, everybody.